if I can be free of a conceptual self and be simply a presence, just an innocent, aware presence, and as I say it now, perhaps each one of you can at this very moment find that within you, you can be either a person or you can be an aware presence, and then at this moment, and the aware presence is alive. Beauty is not bigger than, smaller than, more important than, but it's powerful, but not more powerful than. It's power itself. And there's no unease in it because it's not, it competes with nothing. And so sometimes when I give, let's say I give a talk or there's a gathering or retreat, I'm 100% kind of presence. The person isn't really there. And then in everyday life, perhaps it's hard to quantify, but I might be 30% person, 70% consciousness. It's a coming together of form and formlessness in daily life.
Do you find when you're in that higher place where you're like 100% often in a meditation or wherever, but if you even if you leave the meditation and you just, like I was talking to you, what happened with that surgery and so on, and with this, my body just changing, and everything I look at and everyone that I look at is just so, I'm just so astonished and so bewildered and basically just feeling so loved. Do you find personally, Eckhart, that your opportunity to serve literally strangers, whatever, I mean, people, you almost like see opportunities to be God, to, you know, I mean, how do you define, I mean, I always use the poets because I do a lot of poetry myself. Hafiz said, even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, you owe me. Just think what a love like that can do. It lights up the whole world. And I have found that people who are needing something that I have to give them keep showing up, and it's such a joy to give away, to serve, whether it's advice, whether it's money, whether it's time, whether it's clothes, whatever it might be. I mean, does that happen for you?
Yes, all the time. I can see, by the way, in your eyes, we met for the first time, was it 10 years ago at Omega?
Right.
Very briefly, and you were a lovely being then, but now I can see perhaps the physical challenge that you are facing perhaps did that. It eroded your ego, and there's in your eyes there's a wonderful, this love and tenderness, and I believe the grace that came through the illness, that came into your life through that.
I can't tell you how many sick people that I've been able to help that have just sort of shown up for me. And when I just did this television special, which will air all over, all over the world for years and years, and it feels like such a, even just to be here and to see these faces and to know that out there, that people are going to be touched by, I mean, we got a world full of cancer, we got a world, and it's almost all from fear. I mean, and the Course says always, there's only fear and love, and everything that is fear cannot be love, and everything that is love cannot be fear. So you get your choice, and it seems to me we're talking about sending fear out of our lives and judgment, and, in the I Am discourses it says that if you can remove judgment, criticism, and condemnation towards any of God's children, I believe that means the planet as well, then that's when you will be able to manifest for yourself the life that you desire. As soon as you can rid yourself of those three things, judgment, criticism, condemnation. Yeah.
Yes, which are all thought forms.
Right.
That in itself would be enough. But of course, the deeper implication of that is that you can remove yourself from identification with those thought forms, and so you can be the awareness rather than the thought form. Otherwise, if you say, I mustn't judge, you can still be stuck in the mind. I must love my neighbor as myself. No, you have to step out of the thought form so that you can be present with your neighbor. Give your neighbor means anybody, give your neighbor complete and full spacious attention, and that's the love arises out of that. So it's not traditionally Christians, perhaps because they didn't understand the original message of Jesus deeply enough, you tried to be loving on the level of thought forms, but you can't. You have to step out of the thought forms that create the condemnation and the criticism and be the awareness underneath it. And then you meet the other in that field of awareness. And in that field of awareness, you are joined with every human. You feel the oneness, because the separation is created by believing in every concept, that in every concept is a little barrier. Judgment, condemnations are big ones.
Right. What do you say to, I mean, I get this a lot, I'm sure you do as well, to all the bad things that are happening to good people. I mean, the accidents, the illnesses, the economy. I mean, all of the things that people are so filled with fear, which to me is creating an awful lot of unnecessary illness in our society.
Yes, a big challenge is coming. Some challenges come on an individual level, and sometimes in certain time periods there are large numbers of people who are facing similar challenges in a country or a group of countries. And life is not even meant to be free of challenges. The challenges have a purpose. Many of them, of course, are produced by the egoic consciousness, but if you look at it from a highest perspective, even the egoic consciousness that produces the suffering and the dysfunction on the planet, collectively and in individual lives, even that ultimately has its place in the transition to a higher state of consciousness, because eventually the ego creates so much suffering and challenges that it self-destructs. It awakens you because you can't stand the suffering anymore. That happened to me.
So much of the suffering, though, seems to be around this whole thing about greed and money and the economy and the dysfunction that our world seems to be in at this time. That there seems to be almost like
it's a crisis, moving towards a crisis point.
Right.
And I believe that's connected with the awakening of consciousness, because it's only when the crisis is reached that a new level can be attained. I think that probably applies to every species, even on lower levels of development. For example, I believe there's some biologists who say that also, when they say that life started in the sea and at some point it moved onto land. I don't think any fish would voluntarily jump onto land and start crawling. It's just too hard. But if a fish if there's a huge area of water that suddenly shrinks over a long period of time, suddenly the fish is forced to move out onto land. And then at some other point, an animal is forced to develop wings and fly because a crisis has been reached. And then a leap happens to a different level of consciousness. In humans, it's consciousness. And that's where we are now, where the egoic consciousness is becoming more and more dysfunctional. Or compared to a caterpillar who is approaching the end of its lifespan as a caterpillar, when the crawling gets more and more difficult. Before it was okay, the caterpillar was a caterpillar, but now it's reaching the end of its lifespan and says, I can't move anymore, this is terrible. But yes, because you are destined to come to an end, to metamorphose, into the butterfly. And so again, the egoic consciousness creates more and more havoc on the planet.
What about individually, though? I mean, as you're saying that, I'm thinking about myself and what kinds of growth things that have taken place for me, and how quickly. I mean, I think we can speed up this evolutionary thing, especially within our own selves. I mean, for me, I can go to very specific moments in my life as I look back at them now from this age that I am now. I can look back to an event that happened in 1974 when I was sent to my father's grave. My father had walked out on us, abandoned us, put me in a series of foster homes and orphanages and so on up until I was 10 years of age. I grew up with rage inside, anger, just bitterness and so. And through a series of just unbelievably mystical, impossible to explain circumstances, I ended up at my father's grave. I didn't even know he was dead, and was sent there. And in one afternoon, the 27th of August in 1974, my whole life was transformed. And all I did was stand there on his grave. I had gone there to his grave to do something else on his grave, because I was just so filled, and every night I would dream about it. I would be filled with rage and so on. And when I got to his grave, something came over me. It was overwhelming. We've just done a film on this called My Greatest Teacher. Hay House is putting it out soon. But it was like, and I was told to go back and to forgive. And I just sat on his grave and I sobbed and sobbed. And I remember saying out loud, and I knew that something very magical, mysterious, mystical that I couldn't put my finger on was happening to me. And I said to this man I had never seen in my life, except for when I was just an infant, from this moment on, I send you love. I forgive you, I let go, you know. And Mark Twain said that, when you forgive someone, the forgiveness, he said, is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it. And if you can send fragrance out from that rage and from that anger, and I walked away from that experience, I'll never forget it. I went back to New York. I was teaching at a university. I rented a car, went down to Florida, and I wrote a book called Your Erroneous Zones in 14 days. By hand, beginning to end. And today it's got like 55 million copies in 47 languages around the world. And my whole life, when I just practiced forgiveness. This thing with John of God, with this leukemia, when I first got it, I thought, I don't do cancer. I help other people who have cancer. And it's been life transforming. And it happened, it's like it's the process, maybe it's because I'm getting older or whatever, just speed it up. And I went from much more ego to just pure love to everyone and everything I encounter. And my children will tell you, the people that are close to me in life will tell you that they say, my father has changed. He just loves everyone and everything and doesn't know how not to do that. And that happened, and I just wonder, what's going to happen this afternoon? It's like, how fast, do you know what I mean? It's like, I think we can, if we shifted even Christianity, if we shifted it off of I am the crucifixion and all of the suffering, all of the things that are wrong and all of the pain and all of the images of that, to what Jesus really said, which is I am, meaning God, the resurrection. I am the resurrected being. I don't know, I think we can all resurrect ourselves in a huge way.
But the crucifixion actually points to because crucifixion, resurrection arises out of the crucifixion. So right. Crucifixion is the seemingly dreadful thing that happens to a human being. It was, in your case, being abandoned as a child, being put in foster homes, or the illness now, the seemingly dreadful thing that actually grace is hiding there. The moment you come to a place of acceptance, as you did with the forgiveness, and as you did again with the illness, then the grace, and that's the resurrection. The crucifixion is the abandonment, the crucifixion is the illness, and the surrender, and then the peace that comes, and the connectedness with the source that comes then, that's the grace that is hiding there in every moment when dreadful things seem to happen.
Yeah, that's what I wanted you to address. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we'll see how the audience contributes here. Our first question, I'm curious how you make sense of the power of intention and positive thinking, both of which have been very valuable to me, with the idea of moving beyond the mind altogether.
Me too. I've just encountered another being in my life. I encourage you to look her up. Her name is Anita Moorjani, Moorjani, and you can Google her and see in a few interviews. But she was wheeled into a hospital in Hong Kong in 2005 with end-stage lymphoma. She weighed 82 pounds, I think she said, and all of her organs had shut down, and her husband and family were there, and they were waiting for her last breath. No one who has ever been at that stage of cancer has ever come back and survived. And she encountered spirit, God, consciousness, the Tao, and was told that she had the choice to go back into her body, which she didn't want to do because she was in such a divine, peaceful. She speaks about it so brilliantly. She's written a book that'll be out in March also. I wrote the foreword to it. It's called Dying to Be Me. And she came into my life at the right, perfect, divine time. And in response to that question, one of the things that she said that she learned in there is that when she came back, one of the things she wanted to do, because within 4 days, her tumors had shrunk by 70%. She was told if she went back into her body, it would be healed. And then she saw it healed, because there's no time. She was able to see the future and the past all at once. And she said there's no such thing even as past lives. When I asked her about that, she said, how can there be a past life when there's no time? It's just parallel lives. She said, that's the best I can do with it. It's just, everything is parallel. But what she came back with and what she teaches, and she's such a divine, I put her on my public television special, and I really want the world to get her message. She said, the thing that she came back with is that you don't have to be positive. She said, I was positive my whole life. I was always trying to please people and be as positive as I possibly could. She said, you don't it isn't about being positive, it isn't about being right, it isn't about winning, it isn't about being better than anybody else. It's just about being yourself and treasuring your magnificence. If you could just look in a mirror and realize who you are, which is not what stares back at you at the mirror, that's got form to it, but who you are is infinite and divine and perfect, and if you could just live from that place, she said, it will transcend all of the fears, all of the worries, all of the illness and so on that we have on our planet. You just have to be yourself, who you are. And that's what I spoke about when we came out here, the difference between being ordinary and extraordinary. Extraordinary encompasses ordinary. We're all following the rules in some way or another and filling out the forms. But extraordinary means I treasure my magnificence, who I am, every moment that I have. That's the power of intention, which is something I wrote, and the power of now, which is something that you wrote. It's just really about breaking it all down, just treasuring your own perfect magnificence.
Yeah. Yes. So, being extraordinary really is to be awake, to be an awake being, not moving in the dreamland of complete identification with thinking, but to be aware, to be present. That's the extraordinariness, is the awareness. You are that awareness. And then the thinking that arises out of that is a different kind of thinking. It's not the thinking that you need to actually decide, I'm going to think that kind of thought now, I must try to be positive. That's no longer necessary. the thinking becomes more empowered that arises from awareness. And in that, the awareness, for example, gives when I give a talk, and you also, of course, and many of you will have also experienced it to some extent in certain situations. The words come, they're not premeditated, they're not prepared. I don't know as a person what the next word is going to be that comes out of here. So the words which are verbalized thoughts, the thoughts come out of the field of aware presence. And so that's, Jesus said that whenever you don't need to know what to say beforehand. He says the Holy Spirit will tell you what to say, it moves through you. And so then thought actually becomes more empowered too, and then the one consciousness can also create through thoughts that come through you, and can create things in this world that you could never even have thought of before. Things have come into my life I couldn't, if I had been practicing positive thinking at some stage in my life. I did do that also, but I couldn't even have imagined things like that. And so really to rest in sourceful awareness, and then you will see that the dysfunctional nature of thinking that is there when you do not rest in the stillness of being, then that becomes removed, and the thoughts that do then come are fresh, alive. Far fewer thoughts come, because all that mental noise goes, the burdensome, continuous talking in your head, continuous criticizing and judging and complaining. That's still many people's normal state, to have that in that field of awareness, that if not all at once, it dissolves, and then fewer thoughts come, but they are fresh, alive, they make a difference in persons' lives. And so our primary task is, again, what Jesus, perhaps we're talking about this again, Martha and Mary. Martha is trying to get things busy, doing things, preparing the meal. Come on, help me, do this, do that. Walk. And Mary is sitting listening to Jesus, not just listening, she's into, and Martha says, come help me, we've got things to do, there's so much to do. And Jesus says, don't be concerned, Mary has chosen the better part, only the one thing that matters. And really he's talking about the foundation, which is to be, being. And then the doing will come, look after itself. You don't become inactive, but that's the point of rest, and that's the Tao again. You do nothing and everything gets done.
Right.
You don't have a feeling, I am doing it anymore.
When you're writing, is it the same? When you're writing, you write like I do, you write by hand, don't you?
I write by hand on a yellow notepad.
I use white.
Oh.
But I'm only number 3, so I'm taking notes. Will you jot down yellow? But isn't it the same way? What you were as you were describing that,
Yes.
about what you were speaking about, I was thinking, I just wrote a whole book without an outline. I mean, I just sat down every day, 4 hours or 5 hours a day. I would just sit, and I would just, whether it came or didn't come, it didn't make any difference. I was there, and the writing was just.
Yes.
It's all channeled. I mean, it's all coming
Yes,
from.
it's to be there, to have this. The space is there. You are there. You are the space for it to come through. And on some days, nothing comes, and then you have to be just fine with that. Just you sit there, and nothing comes. It's fine. The next day, nothing comes, and suddenly,
It's
Yes.
an avalanche.
Yeah.
You know? But you're saying nothing comes. But what people will ask me, is that called writer's block? That's not writer's block. That's just the joy of being there and realizing that writing isn't what takes place today.
If you
it's
can't,
so joyful.
If you can't accept that nothing comes, then it's writer's block.
Yes, right, right. Yeah. It's just so peaceful and so beautiful. That's a new way of writing for me. And I sent. As a matter of fact, when I did the John of God story, I decided to write the entire thing out and put it in the book. And I sent it to my editor. Now she's been editing everything I've written. That's 37 books since 1971. All right, and she called me up and she said, "Who wrote this?" I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, there's like 17 or 18 pages here, and it's not in your handwriting." I said, "What do you mean it's not in my handwriting?" She said, "Well, the slant is different, the shape of the letters is different, the wording is different. You didn't scratch anything out, because I'm writing, if something comes, I don't like it, I just scratch it out and write something else." She said, "It is," and she said, "and I can't edit any of it. It's just," and literally something had, when I started telling the entities that came into my body and did this healing and sent this dis-ease out and replaced it with love, also were part of my writing. It was just so sweet and magical. And I framed one of the pages there because I've never written like that before. I've never had my letters go this way and the shape of them and everything else. It was like something just came in and took over and just allowed it to come forth. Mm-hmm. That's what can happen. Eckhart, you're talking about this spiritual sort of inner kind of awakening with the formless and so on, but it gets translated into so many changes that can take place in your life. That business about paying attention and being astonished. I'm just astonished at it all. I mean, I did a yoga class before I came over here. I'm just astonished that at 71 I can go into a 105-degree temperature room and do 90 minutes of yoga and walk out and feel great and sit down with Eckhart Tolle and talk to thousands of people all over the world. All of it just blows me away, every bit of it. And all of these faces, all of these nodding, all of this love that's in here, and even being with you, it's so wonderful to have this closeness together. Yes, it really is. God bless you, man. Yeah.
So, a question from our online audience. Someone wrote in, "Since you're both very popular and successful, how do you remain humble and in touch with everyday people and situations and not let your ego take over? It's very tempting," this person imagines, "to get the best table at a restaurant, the best of everything in the material world, etc. So how do you stay humble?"
Well, go ahead, and I'll respond.
Well, as Woody Allen said, being a celebrity has its advantages. It gets you a good table in restaurants. The answer really is what not long ago, 10 minutes ago, I mentioned, not to accept internally a conceptual sense of self that perhaps the world is telling you about who you are. So I remain humble, but not. I said I'd drop it like a hot potato. I don't want to carry around a conceptual identity, because I have experienced in my life how much suffering comes into your life when you live from a conceptual identity in your head of who you are, some idea in your head of who you are. I know that is the beginning of delusion, and I'm not having it. So it's an internal decision.